Today, I'm joined by Scrum.org professional Scrum trainer Duncan Maddox, and we are taking a look at transparency, inspection, and adaptation, and how that relates to Scrum in the real world. Let's get into the video.
Pillars that hold every implementation of empirical process control: transparency, inspection, and adaptation.
Today we're talking about transparency, inspection, adaptation, how that applies to the Scrum framework and all of that kind of stuff. But first off, what does that mean? Transparency, inspection, and adaptation. What is that?
Yeah. So Scrum is an empirical process control framework, if I can use the E word. And empiricism in Scrum is underpinned by these three pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. What that means is we are constantly trying to be open and honest and have an open dialogue so that we can improve our plan for the product and improve our processes for building the product. So the Scrum framework, the events in the Scrum framework are really just an opportunity to inspect and adapt.
Scrum is always encouraging teams to inspect and adapt their own stuff, to improve their ways of working, to improve their output as well. But that can be a real challenge. The challenge of honesty, basically. How teams are now encouraged to be open with good news, which is kind of always the way it has been, but also being open with bad news so we can inspect the things that have gone wrong.
Yeah, and that's why transparency is this first pillar. By transparency, we mean openness, honesty, but also a common language and a common understanding. So when we're talking about our progress, we're talking about problems, everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, and in the real world, that can be a challenge. Encouraging people to talk about problems openly it's a bit of a mindset change. I found with teams, with say a development team and a line management style structure, this openness and honesty is discouraged. I found that working with teams and having someone in the team that's leading by example, having this vulnerability-based trust, someone who's open to saying, yeah, this was a problem, this didn't work, we could have done this better, really helps the team to all engage with that. It sort of opens the floodgates, and suddenly everyone's talking about problems. Everyone's saying, actually, this has been a thing, and this has been a thing, and this has been a thing. Teams want to do this, I've found, but they almost need permission to talk openly about the way they work.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think you said that transparency and openness is a problem. I think it's the problem. It's the single biggest barrier to organizations being successful with Scrum because of all of those things that you said. Most organizations still have this hierarchical structure where bad news is discouraged, where we shoot the messenger, where teams are disincentivized from telling the truth about the real problems and impediments that they're running into.
It's this concept too, I think, of value-based metrics. There's good news and there's bad news. This agile mindset that we try to encourage in teams is trying to flip that around to there's no good and bad news. There's simply news. There's simply, it is what it is. There's simply where we are now and what we think we need to do next. And encouraging that simple, it's just information, that this isn't a bad thing. We don't need to try and hide any stuff away. And I think, how do you think the Scrum values come into that? Because the Scrum values are all about the way we behave, our mindset. And this seems like a mindset kind of thing. It's not a process thing, it's a mindset.
Absolutely.
How do the Scrum values help the teams do that?
Sorry, yeah. Mindset, culture. The three pillars of empiricism are based on the culture of the organization. Culture will eat Scrum for breakfast. Unless you have trust and courage, then you won't be successful with Scrum.
I think, yeah, you're right. You mentioned courage there, and it does take courage for teams to do this, to take that first step, to do something that is a bit out of their comfort zone, saying, look, to the customer, we thought we were going to do this, we didn't, it is what it is, however, here's our plan. That can be quite intimidating.
Yeah, but transparency is that first pillar. Once you've got that in place, you are willing and able to inspect and adapt accordingly. But you can only do that with transparency. So maybe we should talk about what events are baked into the Scrum framework, which allow us to inspect and adapt. So the thing you hear the most about the daily Scrum is, I don't have 15 minutes every day to have this pointless meeting. But the daily Scrum is the opposite of pointless. It's the team's heartbeat. It's their opportunity to inspect and adapt, to look at their plan and effectively recommit to it. Are we still going to get everything done? Do we still believe this is going to happen? And if we know that things have changed, how can we adapt the plan, change the plan, and still get as much done as possible?
I think you're right. And coming back to this concept of honesty, I found that teams have a much more productive Scrum and enjoy their daily Scrum a lot more when they're able to have that open and honest conversation. I think you said teams, you hear this resistance that daily Scrum's a waste of time. I don't have time for this. I find that that is when teams are using it as a waste of time. It's simply a progress reporting meeting. And they're encouraged to hide yesterday's bad news, make it sound like everything's good. And then secretly behind the scenes, they go off and fix what went wrong yesterday and hope no one notices. But the teams that really enjoy the daily Scrum and don't have resistance and just get up there and do it every day are the teams that are simply having an open and honest chat amongst the people who are doing the work about how things are right now. What did we learn yesterday? What do we think we should do next? Based on this spirit of honesty. No one's afraid to speak up.
Yeah. If they're not being transparent, if they're not getting an opportunity to inspect and adapt, the meeting is a waste of time. And they're just going through the motions of zombie Scrum. But as soon as teams feel that they can be open and honest and make changes, then suddenly the meeting comes alive for them.
It's also that courage to have fun with it too. The daily Scrum, I found, shouldn't be a formal event. It shouldn't be going around the circle and an impassionate list of everything that happened yesterday. It's a discussion. It can be free flowing and it can be creative and fun. And that's when teams really enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah, it's the team's event. It's really up to them to make it work for them.
Talking of inspecting and adapting the way the daily Scrum works can be really fun for teams too. Often teams get stuck in this 3 questions thing, you know, that we talk about, what did I do yesterday, what I plan to do tomorrow, blah, 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 all of that. And a lot of organizations feel that that is the structure for the daily Scrum, and it gets monotonous and it gets boring and it loses its purpose. So we can inspect the structure of the Scrum itself, the teams that say, actually, I'd like to talk about this, or perhaps we try doing it this way to see if there's more value in it. They have more buy-in to that and they have more fun with it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that the 3 questions format is no longer the mandatory way of doing the daily Scrum, but it's still in the Scrum guide. A lot of people think that that's how you have to do the daily Scrum. And maybe that's why they're not finding it useful.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. Like, what's the daily Scrum for? It's to tell everyone what we did yesterday, what we plan to do today, and are there any blockers?
Yeah.
Game over.
Yeah, every event is an inspect and adapt opportunity.